Their Monument. Written by NPC 200.
Shut up, pup!
The voice thundered out from the darkened back of the bar with the scratchy undertones of a cybernetic modulator. The shout stunned the bar full of fungoid saluvaton into silence as they tried to make out a shape in the darkness. The purple-skinned fungoid standing on the centre table, who had been calling for the human statue in the government square to be torn down, shouted back.
"What are you, a sympathiser to the slavers? Step out here into the light, where we can see you."
The hive-mind Duskinian bartender reached under the counter, pulling forth an old bottle of polish, anticipating its use, as the heavy metal table in the back corner groaned, sliding across the floor, drawing long scrapes into the old flooring. Into the light stepped a nearly 11-foot tall reptilian Verulian. His old and grey skin was stretched and covered with scars and battle tattoos. The large frame supported an amount of muscles that would crush a lesser creature, and finally there was the augment. Cybernetics from age long past were fitted to the creature's skull and replaced one of his 4 arms. His triangular head swept the room, taking in all its inhabitants before the voice rumbled forth. "You fungoids," he sneered. "Your lives are so short you cannot even remember a century ago." He gestured to the bartender, wiping down glasses. "The Duskinian don't live long, but at least their hive mind remembers. But your kind forget so easily." The immense creature rocked back on its hind legs, the floor creaking under him. "I am Garogath the Herald, and I have walked this galaxy for nearly 1,000 years. I was only 40 cycles old when the humans lifted themselves to the stars, and I was almost 300 when the stars were sundered and our very galaxy was forever darker." The room went silent as the small fungoid stared at the towering alien in their midst. The grey-skinned cyborg took a long breath and in a quieter voice continued. "Sit down, pups. Let me tell you a story those propaganda mills you call schools won't." Quietly, the dark-skinned bartender appeared at his lower left arm with a drink. With barely a glance, the old creature lifted the glass and spoke. "I was only 40 cycles old when the humans made contact, back when the galaxy was still big and empty. The old Verulian Republic and a few other nations met the Terran Empire. Mind you, they were no empire at the time, just had some figurehead they called the Emperor. Anyway, it was a no-name system, and we signed a non-aggression pact and ignored them. They were better trading partners, and they seemed content to be left alone with a few dozen other races they had dealt with. They weren't much, a small nation, maybe some better tech than most, but nothing so advanced. Of course, it didn't take so long before we found out about their psychics." At that word, a gasp and a small hand signs were made across the room. Words against the dreaded, the things that go bump in the night. Then, the humans were more concerned about their own than the wider galaxy, and looked inward to try and figure out what psychics could do before they worried with the larger galaxy, and at the time no one much cared about what one small empire on the fringe of the galaxy might do with their little oddity. They only peeked out of their seclusion when the Diri peacekeepers and the Zelium Enclave began to stir. The Council of Camarian, it was when we got our first inkling of what was to come. Garogath looked into his glass at the blue liquid swirling within. It was also probably the third time I had seen an actual human. Anyway, the council was to determine what was to be done about the two rivals that had been killing each other before most species in the galaxy had good steel, let alone spaceflight. Both the old empires sent representatives, both said nearly nothing. Words were said and promises made, but they were empty gestures. In the end, I guess the human psychics were able to pick up something we couldn't, because less than a week later, Terrans granted what they called emergency powers to their emperors. It was the first autocracy the Western Galaxy had seen in 100 years. His voice rose as he looked to his audience. Then came the Battle of Synath. Nearly 100,000 Xelium and Diri ships clashed in an inhabited star system where the Stone Alien fleet was making port. The Stone Alien were known for their tough ships and powerful guns, but when they tried to intervene, they were swept away like engine wash. When the battle was done, the system had no one living anymore. Both planets were glassed by stray shots. As the rest of the galaxy tried to recover from shock, the humans quietly annexed their neighbouring vassals, and the Diri and Xelium sent out their ultimatums. Join. He turned his massive triangular head to look the creatures enraptured in his story in the eye. Or die. Federation fleets broke apart as they fired on each other, receiving word their respective governments had chosen opposite sides. Federations and alliances that had lasted 100 years tore apart in blood and terror because neither side wanted to fall at the hands of a foe they could hardly fight. The war in heaven. That is what the humans called it. It might as well have been gods fighting gods, for all we could do. The weapons they used were unheard of. Ancient things dug out of vaults, sealed for a reason, and yet these old rivals used them on each other and anyone who got in the way with glee. My homeworld was destroyed by a sonic weapon that drove everyone in the radius into a murderous rage. He drained his glass down his gullet, staring off into empty space. We had to drag the refugee ships into the sun as we listened to them tear themselves apart on board. It was around then we heard the first rumours of something on the eastern rim, but it was all dismissed as the Diri made their last push. Of course, it was the humans. Their little empire, tucked away at the edge of the galaxy, no one paid them any attention. Sometimes we would see a sensor ghost on our screens and dismiss it. But now I wonder if those weren't the humans. Their science and recovery ships slipping into the massive graveyards floating through space and pulling out what enigmatic technology they could to prepare. When the Enclave finally sent a fleet to Terran worlds, it came back scarred. Not destroyed, but repelled. No lesser race had even managed to take more than a few of the Fallen's ships with them as they were destroyed. The Diri saw this as a weakness and attacked. We didn't know at the time, but they were stretched to breaking point as much as anyone else. It took them nearly a year to batter away the Enclave's ringworld defences as the Xelium and their allied fleets ranged across the galaxy, burning planets wherever it went, before the Diri fleets broke the Xelium ringworlds to pieces and pushed them into their own suns. It ended the war, but it also broke the Diri. They fractured. Some wanted to maintain their newfound dominance in the galaxy, while others wanted to retreat to their old homes. Some even wanted to wipe the galaxy clean and become gods to the next generation or some such trash. That was the news we all saw. The only thing we cared about was our tormentors. Those with power like gods brought low squabbling among themselves as we cheered for blood. It was then she came, the Terran Empress herself, alive and seemingly young. After being granted emergency powers over 100 years ago, she begged, as you know. In the beginning, she showed us what they had done. Their weapons that had been locked away had called them to our galaxy. The unbidden, she called them, had come first, tearing their way into our reality. They had devoured only a dozen worlds before the Pretherin scourge and their living ships swallowed them. She begged us to send our fleets, to prepare anything. We laughed, told her to take her fairy tales elsewhere. It was a space station, and yet I swore I could feel the ground tremble beneath me as she spoke. She told us that if we would not defend the galaxy of our own will, it would be done of hers. The old reptilian seemed to shrink as he spoke. We just didn't understand, but we would. The Zelium and Diri were terrifying because they could kill you, your family, and your whole world by accident. The humans and their psychics, though, they could make you do things. They could even make you want to do them. It wasn't join or die, but join. There was no other option. Didn't take long. Not long. Perhaps 2 decades before the divided galaxy was whole. Even the Diri couldn't last when their enemy made them want to surrender, begged to bend the knee. Soon enough, nearly every world had a cabal of human psychics that controlled the will of every sentinel on a planet. It was the might of an enslaved galaxy turned against the Scourge, who had already consumed nearly a quarter of it. It wasn't enough. Only the human and Diri fleets could really stand up to a Queen's swarm. The rest of us were bait, drawing in Queens before a larger, more powerful fleet could swoop in and kill it. Soon the humans realised they couldn't last. We couldn't win as things were. It was too large of a front. Too many queens slipping past the forever retreating line. I remember hearing the plan, Operation Forever Dark. Garrogath leaned forward now into his audience. You see, the theory went, the Pretherin could only survive in the space between galaxies if they hibernated. Without that, they needed to soak up radiation from stars to survive. Enough space between stars, they cannot travel the distance. A murmur ran through the crowd. Yes, you know it. The Sundering. The Scar. The humans have built it as a last resort, a weapon. Not to achieve victory, but to deny it to the enemy. The gnarled fingers snapped, startling the audience. Gone. 1,000. 1,000,000. The humans might know how many stars died that day, the day the galaxy dimmed. We had given all, even split the galaxy itself to try and fight the Pretherin menace. It didn't matter. We couldn't win. For a few years it looked like we might beat them back, but soon, as their other queens arrived from the other side of the galaxy, we thought we were lost. The room had grown dark and quiet as the Saluverton crowd was still hanging on to every word the old reptile spoke. Then it happened. It was a shock. For a moment, it all fell away. We could feel our determination to fight shed like water. Our thoughts drifted to our families. The human psychic hold over us evaporated. Barely a moment later, it slammed back, stronger than ever. At the time, I was on a bridge crew of a battleship. We were carrying a human admiral. When he stepped on the deck, it was as though a god walked among us. His skin was radiant. His eyes glowed. His every step seemed to be of monumental importance. Another drink was pressed into Garagath's enormous hand, but he didn't drink. Instead, his eyes seemed to be looking at something only he could see, as his voice was filled with almost religious tone. Those years I saw the impossible, fighting for the Zelium. I seen worlds shattered and billions massacred at the push of a button. But the humans? They could sit on the bridge of a ship and crush a Prethrin warship with their fist alone. His gaze shifted back to the enthralled audience. You know not the meaning of awe until you have seen a pale 2-meter tall creature crush a devourer of worlds with their bare hands. Those were the years where victory was not something I hoped my children's children might see, but when we were certain, we knew we could see the end of the scourge. The humans could kill it, and for the first time in almost 50 years of retreat, we advanced. Slow at first, but then faster and faster. Finally, nearly 50 years later, it was done. The last world cleansed with nuclear fire, and the last queen was hunted to the very edge of the galaxy, and with the righteous fury we bore down upon it with all we could muster, and it died. Torn apart at the edge of the galaxy for having the audacity to think it could destroy us. We had cleansed the scourge. Victory! A short laugh escaped the old lizard. But you and I, we did not pay the true cost. As soon as the creature was dead, the humans left. They boarded their own ships with all human crews and left. We begged to know why, and all they said was they had one final trial. We asked, demanded to let us help, and they turned us away as they powered to their home system. The reckoning, they called it, payment for their sins. Their worlds were consumed, shrouded, an impenetrable black fog that consumes all who enter it. He scoffed. Sins. They saved the galaxy, and yet they call them sins. Of the fleets that had turned away the Zelium, the people that united a divided galaxy under one banner, the world that drove back and destroyed an intergalactic swarm bent on devouring all life from our galaxy. He shook his giant head. Perhaps 1 million humans survived. Wide-eyed fungoids stared in shock. Yes, they enslaved you and I, but they did not do so out of hate or greed. No, they nearly sacrificed all to save us, and now they live on in their rings, old and tired. Garagath took one final drink. Your people built that statue as a reminder of what they lost, and what was saved. So go ahead, tear it down. But no, you are their statue. Every living creature in this galaxy exists as a reminder of their sacrifice. Never forget that. You are their monument.